The truth bursts apart the lie that Hamas and Palestinians are not the same thing and should be treated differently. So, exactly who were the Gazans holding the 4 Israeli hostages captive in their family home? A journalist writing the kind of Hamas propaganda the Western media love to repeat? And his father, a doctor, or in biased newspeak, a member of the Hamas-run health ministry?
Welcome to the reality show. Today we're joined by Nathan and Anders, and in order to discuss this incredible, unexpected development, Nathan, can I come to you first, given that you are on the ground? How was the news taken there? I bet we lost a surprise.
I mean, for me, I can say I wasn't that surprised to learn that a journalist was holding hostages in his home. Um, I mean, you know, we've known for years that at least I knew this, that this artificial separation between Hamas and the Palestinians is artificial. I mean, it's not like Hamas, took control over Gaza from outer space. It's not like they came, like it's like this foreign body that is like unknown to Palestinians and it just took control somehow, like in a conspiracy theory or something like that. Like Hamas is the causal and kind of almost, you could say, inevitable outcome of the Palestinian culture, of the Palestinian, the ideas that Palestinians hold. So I mean, to me, this wasn't a surprise. The only thing that was a little bit of surprise, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it, is that, I mean, I guess this journalist kind of had a talent for kind of, like on the one hand, he's a Hamas member and he subscribes to the Hamas ideology and Islam and all of that. But on the other hand, he knows how to talk the language of what's popular in the West. He knows how to kind of cater to the woke crowd or identitarian crowd or whatever you want to call them today. So it shows kind of a level of sophistication that they know how to kind of push the buttons of the people in the West while they kind of hold another ideology, even though you could say, I mean, we could argue that there are a lot of principles and essentials that are the same. However, it is still different. So, I mean, that was a little bit surprising to me, the level of sophistication, to kind of have that two-face going on. But yeah, I wasn't surprised that he was a journalist.
Yeah, for sure. Let me come to you, Anders. What are the details that have emerged from this that have caught your attention?
Well, first, before we go there, I want to offer big congratulations to IDF for a successful operation in freeing these hostages, and of course to the families who got their loved ones back. It's fantastic. It's really, really good. And well, who knows? Hopefully IDF knows where a bunch of the others are held and can repeat this operation. Secondly, however many people were casualties in this operation, obviously we can't trust anything coming out of the Hamas health ministry, even though the world's news media still seems to be able to evade the fact that it's a propaganda machine for Hamas. But however many casualties there were, let's hope that as many of them as possible were Hamas fighters or Hamas sympathizers, because with the journalist hiding these hostages and his doctor father being accomplice, I think it just shows us that there is really no, or it's at least very hard to differentiate between Hamas and the Palestinian people. And we have to go down on the individual level. And I mean, going all the way back to the elections in 2005 and before that, a large portion of the Gaza population are Hamas sympathizers. There's no way around it. And then, yes, there are individuals who are not. and which we always have to acknowledge and be prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt. But largely, as a cultural phenomenon, Hamas has a lot of supporters in Gaza.
Yeah, no, that's sadly true. Thank you very much to Jonathan Honig for your super chat. We appreciate it. He says disgusting that Al Jazeera. He says disgusting. Al Jazeera should be put out of business because of this. At least their credentials pulled everywhere here and banned from the USA. And I think that's one of the aspects that's emerged from this. I think this journalist was a correspondent for the Palestine Chronicle, and also as a freelance journalist, also he was did stuff for Al Jazeera at least once or twice, and was certainly on Al Jazeera's website, which is one of the things that has emerged from this. Let me just say thank you to John, who's also become a member. We appreciate you joining us as a member, and being a member, you'll be able to access things like the Atlas Shrugged Book Club immediately after this program. I think Natan, the details about this guy, Abdullah Al-Jamal, who's his correspondent for the Palestine Chronicle. I mean, what I've read about the Palestine Chronicle it wasn't one I come across, so it's not obviously somewhere I get my news from. But it describes itself on its website as a non-profit with a team of professional journalists with respected writers and authors who don't speak on behalf of any political party or champion any specific political agenda. Apart, of course, from advocating terrorism and the kidnap of innocent young people from concerts. What are you aware of the Palestine Chronicle and its role? In apparently it's existed since 1999. Is that something that you've come across?
No, I mean, I'm like you. I haven't heard about them before this. I looked up their I think chief editor on Twitter, and I think he has only 15,000 followers, something like that. So hopefully this outlet does not have too many followers and too many readers. But I mean, I don't know. But I mean, I'm curious. I don't know if the law maybe has something to say about a news organization that has someone on its payroll, an apparent terrorist. I mean, maybe the FBI should look into that. Because I mean, that doesn't sound like an innocent run organization. So I would like to see some action in regard to that. I mean, there are so many questions to ask. I mean, did this newspaper did they know that they were actually hiring a terrorist? I mean, what other information were they gathering from him? So, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, another thing, I'm switching a little bit the subject, but there was a lot of discussion in Israel, like, okay, so we heard that they were held in a Palestinian camp, and a lot of civilians among the hostages. I mean, so there's a question, like, how many Palestinian civilians actually knew that there were 4 hostages basically living in their midst. Now, I mean, I can't tell you. I would assume that Hamas wants to hold them as a secret, so they don't want to let them let the information travel, because then the Israeli intelligence would probably pick up on that, and maybe that's exactly what happened. So, but I mean, who knows? This is just assumptions, speculation, but I mean, it does show you, how complicit the civilian population is, like how everything there is just so intertwined, so connected, which has gotten me to think even the term human shields, maybe there's something wrong with it, because it makes people, like, it implies that Hamas is like using these Palestinians, cynically exploiting them, but it's maybe not so much a cynical relationship like that. I mean, maybe we can refer them more as, I mean, as you said, like Hamas sympathizers, or just Palestinian martyrs. I mean, they know what they're doing. Like, they're helping Hamas. It's not like they're just being, they have no control over themselves and they're just these shields that Hamas is exploiting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, I would call them Martyr wannabes because that's what they want to be. I mean, the fact that the people here in the West who support them do not understand that these people love death more than they do love life. And they can't get their head around it because it's death worship. Nobody in the West can even imagine what it means to want to see your children dead because you think that their death is going to glorify a God that doesn't exist. This kind of mentality is just impossible for lots of people to grasp here in the West, isn't it? And that's part of the problem. That's why they see them as the victim that die in airstrike, but they're not. They're stay put because they need to show how bad the other side is. And because they, as you mentioned before, they're sophisticated enough to understand there are altruist point of view, we'll see them automatically as the people who need help. We offer our support without even realizing it. And they're actually exploiting that aspect of the benevolent aspect of our civilization. For total nefarious reasons. And going back to the Palestinian Chronicles you mentioned earlier on, yes, it might have very few followers, but there are a plethora of these rags, these propaganda machines, because they're very cheap. They're set up very cheaply, and of course they know that they are taking contributions from Hamas people. I mean, this guy in particular, the guy that was holding the 3 hostages, was actually a member of the Hamas, a speaker for the Hamas Department of Labor, which sounds ridiculous. Department of Labor, Hamas. But anyway, they know exactly what they're doing, and again, they exploit our benevolence by shrouding themselves in this air of a non-profit, this charity business. And it means that we all support them with our tax money because the government supports them. And especially here in Britain, I know for sure that every mosque, every cultural center, even those that have been hosting Iran-sponsored speakers and various degrees of hate speech, they're all charities. So we all support them with our tax money. And this is time to look into this kind of stuff because it's going way beyond what's reasonable. Now we know it's in the open that these things are actually fifth column, if you like. It's a way to exploit the Western benevolence in order to support the evil that the Islamists craziness are providing.
Yeah. Is it benevolence though, or is it altruism? I mean, I'm not sure it's actually benevolence.
Lots of people will see altruism as benevolence. They do in order to help somebody else. They don't do with the premise I want to hurt somebody. But the Palestinians and the Islamic brigade know perfectly well that our desire to help somebody else is going to be turned against us because they use our resources effectively to embolden themselves to make themselves richer and spend their money into destroying us.
And that's the ultimate package deal, isn't it? Packaging altruism with benevolence and confusing people with the two when it comes to making people sacrifice for an enemy. Very quickly it leads to that. I think one of the things that I read about the Palestine Chronicle, which goes to what you're just saying here, is that it's funded. It's by its own admission funded by socially conscious progressives, scholars, writers, activists, and people from across the world. And that is the problem here, isn't it? It's the fact that the Western mind, the Western professionals, professors in colleges and stuff are building a group of students who then see donating to organizations like this as part of their benevolence, which is obviously leads to the death of innocent people. So yeah, we do have a couple of super chats. Let me just read those for a moment. So GG Ryder with $10, thank you, says Hamas was not delusional about total victory over Israel. Therefore, Hamas plans on the 10th of the 6th included inevitable destruction by IDF. Did Gaza people object to being martyred? No, not many, in my opinion. I'm sure you're right, because they're sold up to the ideology. They're complicit in the ideology and fired up by the ideology, which leads them to support Hamas through the years they've been in government and running the country. And then PC for 499, thank you, PC, says, no adult in Gaza is innocent. Is that something you would agree with, Anders, if I come to you? No adult in Gaza is innocent, he says.
I wouldn't make a blanket statement like that. As I mentioned before, I mean, we're dealing with individuals, and I'm sure there are some individuals in Gaza who are pro-Israeli, who want this to end, who just want to live in peace and get on with their lives. I'm sure they're very quiet because they fear for their lives. But we have to just be careful not to I mean, you can assign cultural traits to a group, but always keep in mind that we're talking about individuals here. We all have our own opinions and views.
Sure.
So, but I wanted to just comment on a statement you made earlier, Marco, I think it was, about the supporters in the West and how they're mistaken and so on. I would say, yes, there are certainly those who are mistaken and clueless. I think it's better term for it. But there are also a lot of people here who are Gazans in mind. They're collectivists, they're altruists, they are haters of the good for being the good. And there isn't that much difference between them and the Hamas sympathizers on the ground in Gaza, unfortunately.
Sure. Absolutely, yeah. And to go back to the point you were making, well, you know, during Second World War, take France, for example, there was a massive, well, not massive, but there was a big movement of resistance against the Nazis. They were organizing little guerrilla, like, you know, destroying depots and stuff like that. We don't see that happen in Gaza, though, do we? Why is that? Because the major mentality is support for this kind of behavior. So yes, a couple of people we know of have been killed for being accused of supporting Israel. But to be honest, you know, if the Gazans don't like it, they should organize against their government, which is Hamas. So yeah, probably some people don't like Hamas as such, but until you put your ideas into action and you come out on the side of the good, I cannot give them the benefit of the doubt, because we actually don't have any evidence to think that there is a significant group of people who don't like Hamas. As far as we can tell, you know, if they're not Hamas, they are certain supporters, and you know, poll after poll shows that the support is still there.
Yeah, and of course, and you know, but I don't think I blame them at this stage for maybe not organizing or standing up. That would take a certain level of heroism, given the risks and danger they would take. I mean, we're basically talking about a totalitarian state. So it's, I mean, I don't know if the analogy is perfect, but back to the Second World War, you know, there were decent Germans who didn't speak up during the height of Nazi terror for fear of their lives. And you can obviously accuse them of cowardice or whatever, but I mean, I think you have to have a certain understanding for it. And I suspect that in Gaza today, it's probably a tough call to ask for that. It'd be interesting to see once this is over, you know, if you do have such groups surfacing who are advocating for peace with Israel and, you know, let's get on with our lives, create a country that can blossom and maybe develop into something similar to Israel. You know, I mean, the odds are against them, obviously, but
Yeah, I think what we're going to see after is also rats jumping ship, to be honest. Certainly in Gaza, it's not like Iran. In Iran, there is a strong um, um, resistance against the Islamic Republic as such.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan, are you aware of any Gazans who's against the Hamas? Have you ever heard of anything?
Um, I think the Free Press, maybe it was, had a project once that um, what's the word? They presented several Palestinian voices, I think, that were anonymous, but they kind of told their story from within. So I think they managed to, kind of pick a few individuals who do think differently. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It was a long time ago. I remember I saw that project, so I don't know what's going on with that today. But look, I mean, I hope there are innocent people in Gaza. I mean, I hope not because I have any interest, just because I don't know, kind of like for the sake of the human race, that doesn't matter how bad it gets. Some people will still think for themselves, and they will figure out the facts and reality, and they will figure out what's right and what is wrong. Um, but it is hard. I mean, it is hard when you have such a tribal, uh, just a tribal society that is closed, that it's totalitarian, and just violence is just such a uh, it's a ubiquitous part of their lives. So it would be hard. I mean, if you just inject a little bit of freedom, a little bit of political freedom, just give them some, I don't know, to read John Locke, whatever. I'm sure that you will start seeing some voices that can speak with reason and against Hamas. But to do it in this situation, as an individual, it's very hard. You have to, you look around, you can completely detach from reality. The only way that you're looking at things is with, through the eyelid of the tribe, of the family, of the whatever like Islamist faction you were brought in. So, I mean, there are some individuals who are really remarkable, like um, Hassan Youssef, the alleged son of Hamas. So, I mean, his story is incredible. He managed to see through it, and it took him a very long time, but he changed his mind. And Israel does use Palestinians here and now and then to as informants, and they make sure that these people they really have good intentions. Like, they're not just doing it for any narrow kind of interests. So
yeah,
it is difficult, like I said.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, Nathan, since you're there on the ground. So we hear that there are some 2 million Arabs living in Israel. Is that about correct? Or
I think that's about right.
yeah, do they consider themselves Palestinians, or do they consider themselves just Arabs in general, or do they identify with somewhere they came from? Or
So there were interesting polls following in the wake of October 7. I think in Gaza and the West Bank, you saw more support for Hamas, but inside Israel, following October 7, you actually saw that the Israeli Arabs identified themselves more as Israeli. So, which is, I mean, that's I think a positive phenomenon,
exactly.
and hopefully that will continue. But there's been a lot of voices actually from within the Israeli Arab society that are more pro-Israeli. I mean, some of them are more pro-Israeli than the Israeli leftists. So, I mean that's a positive trend, and hopefully that can continue. I mean, my assumption is that they saw October 7, and even if they were kind of buying into the whole, we're Palestinians because we're born as Palestinians, and because they're endorsing these ideas because they learned them from Western intellectuals. So, but maybe they saw the horrifying atrocities, and they were like, oh well, we don't want to live in that kind of place, because I mean, at the end of the day, they do have better living conditions in Israel. So I don't know how long that can be sustained, because it's you need the right ideas and principles to maintain that kind of pro-Western stance. But hopefully this can pick up and continue.
We have another super chat from Gigi Ryder. Thank you very much to you. He says, Ahmed Akal stated that they would fight against peace to Palestinian children's last drop of blood, memory. He was boasting about child martyrs on Iraq TV. Yeah, absolutely. And there's been some reports of what Sinwar has been saying as well, along the same lines, of course, as you would expect. Now, just returning to this journalist, Abdullah Al-Jamal, the guy who was holding these three hostages in central Gaza, in his own home, and it should be stressed, with his wife and his daughter, etc. Now, it seems that Al Jazeera is doing an awful lot of backpedaling already to try and persuade us that he had no connection whatsoever, when he was already listed on their website. He'd already done at least an article for them, and several more, and certainly he'd been a correspondent, as we said, for the Palestine Chronicle. And also, we've seen his tweets back from October the 7th as well, and his enormous praise, calling on God, etc. All of the things you would expect from an Islamist celebrating the death of Jews on October the 7th. None of which comes particularly as a surprise. What comes as not necessarily as a surprise, but as a more distasteful secondary element, is how the Western media is reporting some of this. And I wonder, we've seen evidence of tunnels under UNRWA, headquarters, of data centers. We've seen the links between Palestinian society and Hamas very closely demonstrated through factual evidence on the ground. And yet that has not changed minds. People have still managed to evade the difference between them and put Hamas in one camp and Palestinian civilians in another. And then when you hear that somebody chooses to keep hostages with their family, and Hamas guards, of course, again, it blurs the distinction and makes it clear that there is no distinction, really. So let me come to you, Anders. How do you explain people's ability to evade to this extent when they're presented with facts that go completely against the narrative that they've bought into, and yet they'll still choose to blank it out? I find it incredible.
Yeah, I think it's a tribute to the power of the human mind, if you like, because it is incredible. I mean, but the mind can be used for good and for bad, and the power of evasion is very strong. If you start to go down that path, and you try to square the round hole. It shows also the power of philosophy in general, and of altruism. I think that's the source, whether you call it the fight for whether you call it, rooting for the underdog, or just subscribe to some other collectivist notion. Altruism is fundamentally or eventually what the fight is about, and to upend that and to replace it with a more positive philosophy centered on rational self-interest and individualism and all the good stuff. But that is obviously a long-term project. Now, back to your question about the West, or your comment that we see in the media. I actually did see a Wall Street Journal article that did print the voice of a Palestinian who said that he was angry at Hamas because they choose to hide these people among us, and why. Now, doesn't necessarily tell us anything of what his overall views are, but the Wall Street Journal, I think, is especially the editorial pages, but also the news pages are better, a lot better than average, and kind of often go a little bit against the stream of what we see in the mainstream media. So there are positive glimpses out there. I'm curious to know, I mean, we know that a lot of people are being fed the anti-Israeli propaganda, but still, at least here in the US on the ground, there are a lot of people who are pro-Israel. And when they see something like this, I hope that the reality is kind of is so strong that what they see in the mainstream media, and just like for us, what you see in the mainstream media basically confirm the bias, and they are being critical of what is printed in the media. So I think this will hopefully provide a boost for the good, but we'll see.
Look, but frankly, I mean, is this really such a big deal that we found out that this guy was a journalist and a terrorist? I mean, is it? I mean, when you come to think about it, it's this. He's just holding the same ideas that all of these journalists and all of these medias are holding. Only he applies them. All right, he applies them on the ground, but the other people, they're not applying them. They're just making rationalizations and whatever excuse they have. But it's clearly they're on the Palestinian side. They're clearly on the anti-West, anti-freedom side. They clearly don't care about who initiates force and who defends against force. So I don't think this story is like that. It's not too shocking, and it's not, at least morally for me. I mean, sure, there is a difference. There's a practical difference. I mean, he actually held hostages, and some correspondent in the media in the West, they don't do that. But I mean, they hold essentially, like, in the essentials and the principles. I don't think their ideals are so different. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, to us, this is not a surprise. I've said since the beginning of this war, or I said at the beginning, the only surprise to me was that some people were surprised. Now, I've gotten past that, so now I'm not surprised that people are not surprised, or that people are surprised. And because it makes total logical sense, I mean, we've seen it in the aid workers, in the Palestinian hospitals staff, and now we see it in a journalist. And
at least there was one thing good about the aid trucks, is that the IDF troops, they went. I mean, reportedly they went in with the aid trucks. That's how they weren't detected. So at least something came good of these aid trucks.
Yeah.
That's the first.
I think I totally agree with you, but I think the point is that in the West, people still retain the ludicrous idea that journalist equals objective equals neutral, and then when they're regurgitating articles from Al Jazeera, or the content of articles from these journalists in this region, or the photographs that accompany them, or whatever, they are assuming that they're operating, to some extent, that they're assuming they're operating with the same kind of neutrality and impartiality that journalists operate everywhere, at least in some kind of mental assumption about the nature of the job, even if they're aware that obviously it is Hamas and Gaza that we're talking about. I mean, this is a guy who'd reported from the Gaza border riots in 2018, 2019 for Al Jazeera a lot, and written lots of articles about Israeli treatment of Palestinian prisoners and those kind of things. And so he clearly was obviously he's promoting the same propaganda that he's promoting when he's officially acting as the Hamas Ministry of Labour representative. But also to actually hold hostages in your home means that idea that you are to any extent neutral as a journalist, or that journalism and the source of all this information that is flooding our screens and newspapers here in the West is obviously affected by the fact that they're the one and the same. Hamas and Palestinians are clearly one and the same. This is the proof of it at the highest level.
Look, I studied journalism at the Hebrew University, in Israel. And I remember my professor said no, there's no such thing as objective reporting. So I think they like to, they like to kind of invoke objectivity whenever it suits their particular agenda or whatever claim they want to make. But I don't think that they actually believe that there is such a thing that reporters can actually tell the truth. I think they just use it as a kind of a argument weapon whenever it's comfortable for their position.
Yeah, and I think so, Richard. When you say in the West, I think we maybe have to differentiate between different parts of the West, because at least here in the U.S., I mean, there is a pretty wide awareness of the bias of the mainstream media. Not only about people on the right, but more and more people on the central left and on the left as well. And yeah, I agree with Nathan that there is no such thing as objectivity in media. I mean, as a journalist, you probably should strive to report facts, at least if you're on the news side of things, as objectively as possible. But I don't even know that objectivity. I don't think it's even an attainable goal, because we always bring with us our own opinions and such.
Well, I wouldn't go. I think you can be an objective reporter. I just don't think that today they try to apply any objectivity in their reportings. Yeah.
But I mean, to be an objective reporter, it doesn't mean that you treat everything with moral equivalency. You report the fact as it is, but then you don't engage in multiculturalism, if you like. You don't assume that Hamas hitting somebody is the equivalent of Israel responding to it. That's just wrong. The fact is objective, but the way you report it, what you say about it, has to be there. I mean, yes, we have media which are clearly on the left or on the right of the spectrum, or the political spectrum in the West, but people know about it, and that's why they buy and they read from that. You have this kind of polarization going on, but people are aware of it. Is when they pretend that they don't make a moral judgment and they present the fact as they are, pretending that that's the only point of view, which is wrong. So you should well condemn as a journalist an attack from Hamas. And at the same time, make the point that Israel defending itself, it's an act of self-defense.
And what I've seen, I'd be interested in your two opinions on this, but don't you think there's been a shift in the reporting from the initial reporting at the weekend when this actual rescue took place, to then hearing some of the Hamas propaganda coming out via Al Jazeera, etc., about how many Palestinians died in the area at the time, allegedly, and of course the number grossly inflated and hard to verify, and of course they were being fired, the IDF were being fired upon at the time, so the distinction between militants and civilians is irrelevant when you've got fire coming at you from a particular building. But then after that, as you've gradually seen the coverage change, and you've seen this focus shift onto what happened in Nuseirat, if I'm pronouncing the word right, in that area, then you see an attempt to change the morality of the whole operation, while treating the return of the hostages, greeting their families and stuff as entirely people-friendly pictures on a different page of isn't that great, but then back to Israel an evil, wanton killer of mass civilians, which is their standard line that they've been operating for months. I'll come to you first, Nathan. Is that something that you've seen reflected, the gradual shift in we need to return to the narrative we were doing last week as soon as possible?
Well, I mean, I didn't pay too much careful attention to this. I did see that BBC reporter ask the Israeli representative, I don't know if you saw that, but I mean, that was just hilarious. She asked him, why didn't you warn the Palestinians before you went in? I mean, that was just incredible. But so I can't, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this shift has occurred because, Ayn Rand, she coined the term, the anti-conceptual mentality. And to our viewers, maybe who are not aware of this term, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain just in just a minute, but it's basically a person who is only focused on the immediate perceptual concretes. He just cannot really go above. He cannot abstract beyond just what is perceptually right there in front of him. At least when it comes to the more philosophical, more ideological issues that require some principled thinking and thinking in fundamentals, going to the core of things and having causality in the picture. So these people, they don't have causality. For them, just the only thing that happens is the present, and then they just look at that concretes of the present. So they see, okay, so for the one minute they're like, okay, these hostages were liberated, they were freed by Israeli by the IDF, and that's great, and we're all happy. But then the next minute they look at the casualties on the other side and they're like, wait, they don't care about why that happened. They don't ask, what was the logical, I mean, the causal chain that led to that operation. It's just like the past is completely disconnected. It doesn't exist. So they just live in the concrete present. And these people don't even have a future. Like the future is just also, it's cut off because they don't ask why or what for. Why do the IDF does that? Why Palestinians? What is the Palestinian goal? What is the Hamas cause? Like they don't ask these questions. So, and when you put altruism in the mix, so altruism just cuts off causality because you're just supposed to do what's right. You have the duty to protect the meek and the poor and someone who has a need. So it's really just an anti-justice kind of mentality and kind of way to look at life and at reality. So,
and that's why the main aim of the propaganda, pro-Palestinian propaganda, is to picture them as victims. Because once you label them victims, automatically the Western psyche goes into altruism mode and puts them as the most valuable people in the situation. So if they are the victims, the Israeli must be the evil ones. And this is, as you said, is a kind of perceptual level analysis.
And that same perceptual level does the same when it comes to focusing on hospital and school, and chooses to ignore Hamas militants storing weapons, firing out of, holding hostages in, accessing tunnels through those locations, and it treats them just as perceptual things. And that brings me, and the same is true for the doctor, for example. We haven't mentioned him, the father of the journalist that we're talking about, who's in the same home, who's a doctor, and how many times have you seen stories on the news of Hamas medics, Hamas doctors talking about how terrible the situation is, how it's tricky to deal with all the casualties and all that kind of thing. And yet here you've got somebody holding a hostage, which is the ultimate cause of Israel's response. Beggars belief, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's frustrating. You cannot penetrate that kind of perceptual mentality. It's like there's a wall, and it refuses to think. I mean, essentially, it just refuses to think. So if you try to speak reason, if you try to point out all these causal facts, it just, you won't be able to penetrate. They don't care about facts. They don't care about abstract thinking.
Yeah.
Nathan, do you think there is less of that in Israel than in the West?
No, sadly, no. I mean, I think the Israeli response to October 7 is really, I mean, it fits the anti-conceptual mentality, because Israel should have gone into Gaza a long time ago. It should have, dealt with all these Islamist guerrilla militia around it, but it didn't. It needed like a really catastrophical perceptual level atrocity in order to actually do something. And then now as time goes by, we're like almost 9 months after it, and you see how the mind is already starting to kind of forget what happened. And now Israelis, they want to strike a deal, alleged deal. I mean, it's a paying ransom. And some voices, they want to stop the war, and they're just saying, oh, you can't now wage a war in the north because that will lead to a catastrophe. And it's like the whole perceptual mentality, just they can't escape it. You need to be able to, I don't think that the evidence that you experience yourself is enough if you're not willing to think and to hold better ideas.
So what we see in Israeli politicians, that's pretty much reflecting the mindset, if you like, of the Israeli people in terms of concrete bound thinking.
I mean, I think so. Look, my hope is that they have, a little bit more strategic thinking. I think I heard I think the former IDF spokesperson, he said something that, we're facing at least another 2-year war. So, I mean, so there are maybe people who are thinking about this a little bit more long term, and they kind of maybe, understand kind of that Israel requires some strategic thinking right now, but I'm not sure that they're able to actually do it. So I think that even if they will try to plan long term, they will only choose really kind of narrow, concrete goals. Like we need to eradicate the Iranian nuclear project, or we need to, I don't know, somehow like prevent the Hezbollah long-range rockets. Something very concrete like that. I don't think they will look into, let's actually build a strategic foreign policy, something that can actually enhance Israel's strength and power and security for the next 10, 20 years. I don't think they're capable of doing that.
Anders, I just wanted to ask you, you are in the United States, but we only have a few minutes before the Atlas Shrugged book club. So I just wanted to quickly ask you, did the enormity of the achievement of this operation, which rescued the 4 hostages, how was it taken? I mean, apart from the CNN, who obviously questions everything, do people on the ground realize how big this thing was and how important this development was?
Short answer is I don't know. I haven't really scanned all the major news sources for this and what they said and wrote. And since it happened, I have actually been in my cave, and I haven't really talked to too many people. So I'm afraid I don't really have a good answer for it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And Nathan, I'll go to you then. How was it? How did people take the news?
And how did you receive it yourself when you first heard?
Well, people were euphoric here. I remember there was like a rumor that started on social media and WhatsApp and phones and it just spread like fire. And like I don't know, it just like from the moment that I heard the rumors to the moment that they already showed photos on TV, I think it was maybe a half hour, like tops. So I mean, it spread like wildfire, and everybody was really like a moment of relief and joy. You saw there were a lot of kind of viral videos going on of people in the beach, and then what do you call it, the person there with the megaphone was kind of telling everybody on the beach that the operation was successful and 4 people were rescued alive, and just everybody clapping and I mean, it was a very emotional day, and very happy. Unfortunately, one brave soldier died in the operation, so that's kind of the only downside. But yeah, I think it was. I mean, I don't know the full details of the operation, but from what it sounds, it was really incredible, and took a lot of thinking and mastery to pull this off.
It did, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Of course, we had the sad news about 4 IDF soldiers dying in another operation in Rafah. Now, one of the things that I've heard is that Al Jazeera has been suspended for another 45 days. They've extended the ban on Al Jazeera within Israel, which is perfectly understandable, and you've got good evidence here as to why that's necessary. Is that something that you would expect to be continued indefinitely and be extended again, Natan? And how do you deal with the accusations, at least, however ill-founded, that that's suppressing free speech?
Well, I haven't thought a lot about this issue, so I don't want to be too definitive in my answer. But just to answer the first part of your question, so I think they will continue the ban at least as long as the war continues. But I wouldn't be surprised if the war stops and then they will kind of get back. Maybe it does make sense from a free speech point of view. I haven't really thought about it, but I will say this. I don't think that Israel needs a smoking gun, like to show, oh, Al Jazeera, they're actually helping Hamas, or, here's they're reporting from the ground and they're showing Hamas, like where the IDF troops are located. I don't think Israel needs like that kind of a clear case evidence in order to ban an organization that just its ideology and agenda is, anti-Israel and pro. I mean, just think about like during World War II, would you let a media outlet report, in favor of the Nazis from Britain or the United States? I mean, from a individual rights point of view, from a political point of view, it doesn't make sense, because you cannot spread ideas that are, pro your enemy whilst you're at war with that enemy. I mean, I'm willing to hear, counter arguments about that, but I think that when you're at an actual war, there's a line to draw there.
Right. Anders, any final thoughts?
No, I pretty much echo what Nathan said on that subject.
Sure. I think the important thing you said at the end there, Natan, was true, that it is a time of war. And one of the things that Al Jazeera has been doing, certainly on its live news channels, is doing as much as it can to report movements of IDF troops and obviously give a heads up to people within Gaza as to where the Israeli forces are. And obviously that's something that you want to counter in order to preserve your ability to end this as quickly as possible with a successful military operation. So last question then, Natan, just looking forward, does this change the dynamic of anything in terms of, negotiations for hostage release in the future? Does this strengthen Netanyahu's position, given, and indeed the IDF's position, given, the events of October the 7th? Obviously, this returns them to a much better place in terms of their standing within the public, I would assume.
I don't know. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nathan. No, you go ahead.
Oh, well, just one more point about the last subject. I think that in the midst of war, when you have an organization like that spreading propaganda, I mean, that demoralizes the citizens, and you cannot allow that when you're at war. I mean, maybe, when it's peace and all that, you can have people spreading evil propaganda. That's fine. But when you're at war, you want your population to endure and to be able to, actually win the war. So that's that. Now, in terms of this particular operation, I don't know if it changes much in terms of the hostage deal. To be honest, I don't really know what's going on in terms of like Israel's strategic, policy. I don't know why Israel hasn't gone into Rafah. I don't know why the operation is halted so long. I mean, you could be cynical and you might say Netanyahu is, it's in his interest to prolong the war because now he can stay in power for longer. On the other hand, maybe it's the U.S. kind of, bullying Israel into stopping the war, or it could be just Israel, just not having the kind of moral conviction and courage to do what it needs to do. I don't know. Like, this situation is completely bizarre to me at this stage. I think that politically there will be a major change, but I don't know if it will be, at least, ideologically or philosophically significant enough for a change. I think Israel will just become more nationalistic and more kind of collectivist after this. But like, essentially, I don't know if there will be a significant change.
Okay, well, I guess we're pretty much at the end of the show there. We really ought to wrap, because we do have the Atlas Book Club coming up immediately after this for members of Ayn Rand Centre UK. So I guess thank you very much to Anders, to Natan, and we'll see you here on this channel again tomorrow for the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.